Okay, I am so excited to chat with Nicole Jardim, and I think the universe is finally allowing us to talk. We've tried this several times. So apparently, two women who know about your cycles is like, kind of conspiracy theory. Like it's not going to happen, or the women will get their way, maybe.
I know, right?
So Nicole is a health coach, mentor, speaker, and she wrote Fix Your Period, which is a phenomenal book that I recommend to just about everybody in our practice. I think it's like period. I'm sure there's another book called this, Period 101, but like basically that's kind of like what I think of it as. And so I'd love for you all to hear about Nicole's story and how she got there and why she has such passion towards periods.
Thanks, Cristin, so much for having me. I am immensely grateful for these kinds of chats and interviews because I feel like they're just the realest thing. And that's what we need. We have to have these conversations. And for me, I lived throughout my whole teenage life with problem periods, and nobody really knew that they were problematic because we, of course, live in a society where all of these issues are so perpetually normalized. And my mom also had terrible periods, so she assumed that everything I was experiencing was completely normal.
On par.
Right? I know, exactly. I know. I'm like a period cliche, I swear. So I remember though, at about like 16 or 17, I started to have more irregular cycles. So they would come every 2 or 3 months, and then they were pushing into 3 or 4 months. And I remember her saying, "Oh yeah, this isn't totally normal." And so she finally took me to the gynecologist, who immediately wrote me a prescription for the pill. And she was just like, "This is the solution right here for your irregular cycles.
Just shut it down."
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like we're going to shut your body up with this thing. And so, yeah, so your period pain, your irregular cycles, you're throwing up from the period pain, all of it. And I took that for 5 years. And at first I was convinced I'd found my silver bullet. This was it. And over the course of a few years, I started to have all of these side effects, like literally poster child for pill problems. I had everything like chronic UTIs, yeast infections, sex started to hurt. My sex drive went away completely. My hair was falling out. I had developed melasma literally all over my face. It was just mortifying. And I had no idea what to do. And I finally, after seeing so many doctors who could not give me any answers, I went and saw an acupuncturist with nothing to lose. And he was the first person who explained that the pill could be part of this problem. And I didn't believe him because nobody had ever said anything like that. And that was really where the thing started to shift. It was totally the catalyst for me starting to do this work and changing my health. And it led me on a 10-year saga. And here I am, well, almost 20 years later now. And here I am doing the work that I do. So, it always sort of stems from some sort of personal catastrophe, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, I think that where there's always, any passion that we have comes from experience.
Yes.
Typically. So
Should.
And I mean, I think that then, you can empathize more so when you've gone through something, for sure.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
So how did you end up going from the pill into this is your profession and you wrote a book?
It's a long journey. Like I said, it started with this acupuncturist, and I suddenly got really interested in all of these modalities. I tried pretty much everything. I was like, "Oh, vaginal steaming, sign me up." I did whatever I kind of got my hands on, and really it was a lot of trial and error, a lot of experimentation with changing my diet, trying all kinds of different diets. I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to be vegan this month," things like that. And eventually I kind of figured out what worked, and I did a bunch of training. I trained with our mutual friend, colleague, Jessica Drummond, and Dr. Sarah Gottfried. I did a training with her. So I did like multiple routes to get to where I was going to go. And ultimately, I just felt really strongly that with the book, I wrote it for everyone who just doesn't have any clue what's going on. And I feel like that's the majority of us. As you know, this is kind of where we're at right now in our society, where women, anyone who menstruates really is just really struggling with what a hormonal imbalance is, what this looks like, why is my period doing whatever, insert the problem here. And there's just such a lack of general understanding. And And so that's really why I decided that this book needed to be out into the world.
Yeah, I think it does just that. I often have patients and, they'll throw out something, well, I went to the gynecologist and I'm going to, regulate my hormones and go on birth control. And I'm like, hold on.
Yeah.
Which,
Right.
you hear, that's like the thing you hear all the time. And I'm like, first of all, it doesn't regulate your hormones, it shuts it down. But then I start to ask questions and they don't know, they don't know. They're not even, they don't even have the knowledge to have a conversation with the medical professionals about it and what feels right to them. It's so foreign. And so that is where I really feel this book has helped a lot of my patients, where then they can come to me. I said, just read this or listen to this podcast for a little bit, like just get some base, like just start gathering some info. And then they're like, what the? I'm like, yeah, I know. Like why didn't anybody tell me? Why? I don't understand. How is this not known? And that, does beg the question, why is this not known? What do you think as far as, I could have a list of like education, culture, I think there's many variables, but what do you think really was a driver and why women, girls still don't know this information, aren't being given it? And when can that change?
Oh, I know, seriously, the $1 million question. It's changing. I really think it's evolving. And that's, something that I'm so excited to see. I feel like the conversation about menstrual cycles, about hormones is so out there compared to what it was 10 years ago when I started. I mean, nobody talked about this 10 years ago. And now I feel like it's really become mainstream. I feel like in 2015, I believe NPR, somebody else, no, not NPR, but NPR talked about it as being the year of the period. And so I feel like that was really the turning point for a lot of us. And, in the US, particularly, obviously, because this is where I have the most experience, and I hear this about other sort of, developed nations as well, is that, we live in a culture of secrecy about our periods, right? Like I was just on the Yoga Girl podcast, and we were talking about that thing. She said, I sat at lunch as an adult with my friend 2 weeks ago, and I did the like sliding of the tampon underneath my hand secretly. And I was like, it's incredible. As adults, we're still doing that. I mean, there have been times as an adult, I'm still doing that. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. But there's so much shame around our periods. And I think that, when you think about the cultures where they view your first period as an initiation into womanhood, where a girl will get a coming of age ceremony and there's large celebrations and feasts and all kinds of things. We view it as this terrible thing that's about to happen to us or has just happened to us. And I think that so much of that relates to this loss of ritual in our society, in our sort of modern society. And I also think too that periods have become so problematic that that also adds to the issue, as we know, right? Your period pain is at epidemic levels. Endometriosis, conditions like uterine fibroids. I mean, more women have them than not. And, we're at a point where I think that, this education is so critical. And because periods have been so shrouded in secrecy for so long, that I think has been a huge driver of this culture of periods are terrible. We don't need to know anything about them. We just need to shut them down with the birth control pill. They really just fall into the category of the unmentionables, and that's just that. And we go on with our business. And then, as we both know, you come off the pill in 20 years and you want to have a baby, or you're having some issues, and then things just blow up and you realize that there's been so much damage that's been done over the last however many years you've been on the pill. And that's really where I think it's like a huge reckoning for a lot of us. It was for me. So yeah, I think that's part of why we're where we're at.
And I see, even if fertility wasn't an issue, I work with a lot of women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, and now we're talking about brain health and bone health and heart health. And it's like, oh, I didn't ovulate for so many years and I didn't get that progesterone. And so, and not even knowing if you ovulated, and what that would mean, and how connected that is to our longevity and health. So I do see that as sort of even across the lifespan, if girls at 13, like that would be great if there was some ritual that wasn't, that they were married off. Like it was like,
no marrying off.
That was,
like a period party.
Yes, a period party. That would be so great. And then we would give them your book, and they would maybe get AirPods or something cool. They would be excited about it. It's this thing that they're proud of. And I told you, I have a daughter who's 13, and as her and her friends are all starting to talk about this and who has it and who doesn't, and I am getting a lot of texts from parents. What should I do? Should I take her to the gynecologist? Does she need a PAP? Like, the other thing, I'm like, oh my God, like we're all people that have kids and we don't even know what we're doing. And so like so the kids don't know. And so at least, early on, if we could get them like real good education where it's like, just track what your body's doing and here's what's normal. And I feel like you need like a 6th grade version of this.
I know. I have seriously considered it. I really feel like I could, but writing one book is plenty.
I know.
Oh my
gosh. Just put it on your list, okay? Just put it on your list.
It is on the future to-do list. Although I will say, my friend Nat Kringudis, she's a colleague of mine as well. She has a book called Beautiful You, and that is a really gorgeous book for preteens and teenagers. So I feel like that could be really helpful. I think it's available in the US. She's in Australia. But if it isn't, it will be. So that's one to add to the list for sure for people.
Great. Yeah, because I think that if we could change that culture early on, they start to have more knowledge, then they can ask better questions. And when, and then hopefully maybe we get into the medical education at some point.
I agree. I know. I think about this a lot. Like I think about what would be the motivation for a young person to, not go on the pill and really track their cycles and all of that. And I think a lot of them really are doing it, especially because, again, we've sort of removed the shame factor to some degree. And so many of them are really into tracking their cycles and whatnot. And I think, oh my gosh, what would I do to have that kind of data on my body? The last 30 years would be so good. But I think also too, the motivation around making sure that you have a healthy cycle really stems from the fact that, as you were mentioning before, when you get into your 40s and 50s and you start to think about brain health and cognitive function and your sleep and bone density and your heart and your breast health and your uterine health, and maybe positioning that in a way that it makes sense to someone who's younger, that, this is all going to contribute to your overall health for years to come. And I know that when you're young, it's kind of like, whatever, but there's got to be a way, I think, to motivate younger girls to really think about their cycles as like a barometer of their overall health, which is what I talk so much about.
Yeah. So, maybe the next 10 years, the 10 years, like I do see it changing. I do, but I also sometimes don't know if I'm in my own bubble where it's like, yeah, it's totally changing. I talk about it all the time. But so, well, it's a good place to start. So tell me a little bit more about your book and who is it for? Like, because it's really about, you go through some pretty detailed problems too, so it's called Fix Your Period. So it's not just informational about here's what's normal, but it's like, here's what's wrong and here's what to do about it.
Yeah, it's funny because when I think about, fix your period and what people think you do to fix your period, it's often the birth control pill or an IUD or some other kind of medication. And so I think we're constantly going up against that conventional paradigm, which is, this is how you address these issues, and really trying to debunk that. And that's, what I tried to do, especially in the first 3 chapters of the book, where I'm, breaking down periods 101. What does all of this mean? What is actually happening in your body on a cyclical basis or a monthly basis for some of us? It's one of those things where people are completely blown away by all
Yeah.
that's going on unbeknownst to them, every single month. And that's what I really want. I want us to be completely in awe of our bodies, to know that our bodies are actually quite miraculous and they're not some sort of medical mystery that you have to sort of unravel when you're 45 years old. I mean, I just think that that is such an outdated way of viewing periods and just our cycles and how our bodies work in general. So the first 3 chapters, or part 1, was really about getting super clear on what everything means. You have a heavy period, I'll tell you why you have a heavy period and what that means for your health. And, whether you have period pain or ovulatory pain or irregular cycles or whatever, I wanted to break each of those things down. So that's really part 1. And then part 2 is my 6-week protocol. And that really, for me personally, was the crux of this book, because I wanted everyone to understand that there are specific things you can do. And it's not just some sort of esoteric, like, oh, I'm just going to balance my hormones thing. This is very clear. And I really wanted everyone also to understand how all of this stuff is connected, because I've said this quite a few times. This is not revolutionary. It is not rocket science at all. I'm not necessarily saying anything different to anyone else. It's just that I'm connecting it to your menstrual cycle. I'm showing you how it's all playing out in relation to your cycle and how to do something about it. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I love that, innately, that living with your cycle for women is something that's like the 9 to 5 cycle is a male regulated hormone cycle.
Yes.
And so if you start thinking about things on a week to week basis, we, on our clinic, we've totally changed, like, we all know where we're at in our cycle, and we do planning, and not that you can completely change it, but you can really look, the more you know, you can have a day off when you're going to get your period, and if that's like a pretty low day for you, and you want to rest, so there's a new normal you can create, and you just start to understand things a little bit differently when you're looking at it from a week to week instead of a day to day.
Yes. So it is the most, I think, life-changing aspect of our cycles for women when they discover this. They're like, wait a second. Nobody told me about this stuff. Yeah, right. And we've all been living in this very masculine society for so long. And that's, those traits are rewarded, right? The push, 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 go at all costs, wake up early, do everything you need to do, and then go to sleep and do it all over again every single day. Whereas obviously women are cyclical beings. I mean, men are too, for sure, but we are. And when we understand that our bodies are producing various quantities of hormones at different times in our monthly menstrual cycle, and those are, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, to name a few, we start to have this whole new world open up for us. So we start to understand that this is going to change our moods, our physical responses. It's going to change just how we feel generally. And that is a huge step, I think, in really embodying how, to live in sync with your internal rhythms and just feel more connected to your body. And I think it's a big step towards solving a lot of the physical and emotional problems that we experience that are associated with our cycles.
Yeah. And even our expectations, I think that, if I'm in that luteal phase or in those couple days before, I'm probably not going to be a rock star. It's just, and it's okay, because it's like, that's why I'm not doing so hot today. And instead of like, why, what do I need to do? Do I need more caffeine? Do I need to and there's this like blame or like that something's not normal. But then when it's validated and rationalized, that I think you live with it and support it instead of fight against it.
Yes, I know, right? The whole idea of like working with your cycle rather than against it. I'm all for that. And I think that once we are able to do that, things really start to fall into place. Like we understand, that ovulation is the star of the show. And that's really what we need to be focused on, making sure that we're ovulating and ovulating consistently. And everything else really revolves around that. And once we have that in place, then the rest of our cycle is going to be significantly easier. Our luteal phase, which is, traditionally marked by really bad moods and anger and anxiety and bloating and PMS symptoms, all the PMS symptoms are, that really starts to dissipate when we start to get our cycle working for us and really, like I said, working in tandem with it rather than constantly feeling like we're working against our biology.
Yeah. Well, I'm day 9 today, so I'm like ready to go.
Oh my gosh. Isn't that so funny? I'm on like day 13 and I'm on fire. I was feeling that for the last, I know it kicked in at day 9 and I was so pumped. I'm like, yes, I can get so much done now.
I'm like, I know, but I do have this like, I would like to be like this the entire month.
Wouldn't it be great? I know.
Although I can respect the other phases, I do love this phase of, just feeling on top of everything. So,
right. I know. And like your brain functions amazingly well.
I know. I'm like, I remember things today.
Yes. I so relate. Especially as you get into your 40s, you're like, wow, I really need that ovulatory phase so bad right now.
I know. One interesting question though, how do you recommend postmenopausal women live cyclically?
Yes. I really love this question because I think, again, many times postmenopausal women are just sort of coming into this realm and they're understanding that a lot of them say this to me. They're understanding that this is the way they dealt with their periods was not at all how they would have wanted to have that happen, but they just didn't have the resources and the information wasn't there. So a lot of the time I hear things like, I'm 55 now and I wish I'd known what I know now, kind of thing. I wish your book had been around or whatever. And I think that we can all do this using the moon cycles. I have a really good friend, her name's Jen Rasiopi, and her book has just come out. It's called Cosmic Health. That's another one that I think that people will really appreciate if they're into the moon cycles and just, working with those. And energetically and emotionally and physically, they can be really useful in terms of the fact that they are so connected to our own cycles. So the full moon would be ovulation. The waning moon would be the luteal phase. The new moon would be your period. And then, the lead up to the full moon again, the waxing moon would be your follicular phase. And I think that anyone can do that. And I wrote about this in one of the final chapters of the book, where you can really start to sync your life, everything you're doing in your life to these moon phases. And I think it can be really useful for managing your energy and your time.
I think that's really beautiful. I think think that that's how we should all sort of be anchored, but that's not gonna. So I doubt that's gonna happen again.
Yeah. So, I like that, how we should all be anchored. I think that's really cool. I agree. I think we should be thinking about having these rhythms in our lives because we know this. We cannot go. Like it just doesn't work for us. And we are left in inevitable burnout. And I think that if you use those moon cycles as a guide or as a framework for managing your energy and your time and your bandwidth, you will really see a difference in how your health and how it shows up in your health. Yeah.
I have a friend a long time ago that I remember one time, and I think this was college, and she sort of mentioned her moon cycle, and I remember thinking like, what are you nuts? Like hippie.
Yes, totally. I know. I used to think the same thing too. I mean, I was like the unlikeliest period.
Yeah. And now I'm like, let's all live according to the moon.
Exactly. I know. Happy new moon.
I know.
Here we are. I know.
So that's so great. So what else just your book is a great resource, but I know you have a couple other cool programs that you do.
Yeah, I do. So one of the newest ones I have is called Harness Your Hormones. It's just a 28-day program. I wanted to pull concepts from the book because obviously the book is from older programs. I've updated a bunch of things, and I wanted to make the harder parts of the book into a program so people had videos and resources, recipe book, meal plans, all that stuff. And so I created the 28-day Harness Your Hormones program, and that really is helpful for someone who wants to kind of like work on addressing their, the big picture issues and starting to, just so they can start to feel better. I feel like it's a good first step. I also have a blood sugar program as well that I'm in the middle of revamping. And that is, I think, also a critical component. When I think about blood sugar and insulin dysregulation, it's so not cute and sexy at all, but it really will change your hormones in a huge way, as you know. And like, I really believe that that's a good first step for people as well. So those are two of my main ones. I also have a birth control protocol, and I have like the big Fix Your Period program for people who, really want to get deeper into this work and are really struggling with big issues.
That's so great.
And a podcast. The Period Party.
And the Period Party, yes, which is
a lot of great guests on that.
Yeah, had a great guest, great info, and I think that's a great place to just sort of keep learning, and you just hear things, and again, it's a lot of ahas, like, oh, that makes sense. Oh, right, yeah, yes. Okay, that's great. Sure. Well, this has been so great talking with you. I feel like we could chat for hours, and I love talking to people like that. And so your book is a fantastic resource. I know you have other resources, and I'm excited to share it for anybody at our clinic and anybody that watches this. Really, it's a great first step. You have to learn this info. It will change your life in a good way.
Oh, thank you so much. You're so great. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching that video. Please hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more of those videos and keep learning on how to read your body. Have a great day.